Thanks for those of you that have been watching that little dance. Apologies for my lack of technical skill, but if you know me, you know that's not unusual. And so let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot to cover, and we've already lost a couple of minutes. So again, apologies. My name is Russ Graf. I'm Vice President of Channel Management for NETSTOCK. And NETSTOCK is proud to be a sponsor here of this event and a charter founding member of acuCONNECT, the community. We are big believers in it, so proud to be part of that. Quick agenda. We're going to cover the 5 steps of the business maturity journey, actually specifically the inventory component of that. We'll talk about that within a framework of best practices, cover a quick discussion of some fundamental topic of inventory risk, which is what this is really about managing. And then we'll dive in more deeply into the maturity curve itself within inventory planning and management. We'll take a quick segue into a subset of that, which is on forecasting, and then we'll wrap it up with some change management topics. So nothing too earth-shattering here to start with. In terms of the 5 steps on the journey, and you'll probably hear me use that phrase journey or path a number of different times, because that's really what we're talking about here. And I think like any journey, you need to understand where you currently are, right? What's my current location? What's my current status? What am I doing today? And how is that working? What tools, what processes, what technologies, all those kinds of things do I have in place today, and where do I stand? And then know what the next step is, right? Where do I want to get to from where I am? Once I know my current level, what's next on that journey? And then importantly, how do I get there? What are the components of me getting that, going to that next step? And a big part of that is an assessment of the people and the processes and technology that we have in place and that we could deploy going forward as we move along this curve and this journey. And then I think it's also important to understand the impact of making this effort, right? Why am I doing this? If you're familiar with Simon Sinek, he always talks about why, right? Why am I doing this? And then part of that is understanding what the level of improvement, what the level of impact is going to be on my business if I make this effort. And I think it's good to have that out there as a North Star. So to dive a little bit deeper into the concept of best practices, right? It's really around this framework that I like to leverage, which is people, process, and technology. So all those things are part of the process that we need to understand what our team is capable of doing. Who do we have on the team? What are their skill sets? What are their responsibilities? Do we have the right people in the right place doing the right things? If not, do we need to add to the team? Do we need to skill up the people that we do have, understanding what their backgrounds are, what their goals are personally and professionally, and so forth? Obviously, our people are our most important asset. We're going to be talking about inventory, which for many businesses is the largest asset on the balance sheet. But really, the key asset in all of our companies and all of our organizations are our people. So take an honest assessment of what that team looks like, where there may be gaps, and then can I fill those gaps by skilling up and training and providing the resources necessary to improve my team, or do I need to go outside and add additional folks to the team? And then, of course, we're looking at process. As an ERP organization, we're always looking at what are the processes and data flows and information flows and so forth that I need to have in my organization to manage all these different business functions. And so, of course, in the area of inventory management, that's the shipping, receiving, packing, all that kind of stuff, physical counts. What are the processes? What's the paperwork flow look like? What are the responsibilities and authorizations and sign-offs and escalations and all those things that are related to the process. And then, of course, the third piece, near and dear to most of our hearts, is the technology component, right? What are we dealing with there in terms of tools that we have in place? Where are there gaps? What do we need to do in addition to what we have? And when we evaluate and talk to a lot of our customers that are talking about making this journey along the inventory path and trying to put this improvement process in place, when we look at their technology, we see a couple of different areas and tools that are in use. And you may see yourself in some of these positions, right? If you're an end user listening to this, you think about that. If you're a partner listening to this presentation, think about as you talk to your customers, where are they at with their current technology in terms of inventory management? And obviously, the acumatica ERP application is extremely strong in this area. It's won awards for its basic functional inventory capabilities, very strong, very easy to navigate, etc. Lots of ability to build custom reports and get data out of the database within the application, right, to maybe tweak some things and make them specific to my business environment and situation. And then oftentimes we see spreadsheets deployed. And we may use either direct from the database or maybe from the custom filtered reports, and then grab that data and extract it and dump it out to spreadsheets. And so that's a level of improvement perhaps in getting some additional sophistication and analysis into our inventory environment. Sometimes we see that then extending into BI tools and dashboards, which tend to be a little more interactive, right? So reports tend to be pretty static and you have to rerun them. Spreadsheets can be a little bit more dynamic, but they tend not to be as visual. So now I've got dashboards and business intelligence applications that I can make those things a little more visual, especially for executive level summaries and so forth for folks to get a quick glimpse. And then we see additional third-party applications, products like NETSTOCK, that are single purpose applications built specifically to help you navigate the inventory management. And if it's physical inventory, that might be warehouse management solutions, either the native functionality within acumatica or third-party applications there. So lots of different pieces and parts and components of technology that could be in place to help navigate all the data, right, and the processes and the flows of information. So I think a key fundamental concept that we have to have in mind here as we continue the conversation about the maturity curve of inventory management is inventory risk. And it's really a risk to availability, right? That's really what we're concerned about, is do I have product available to me, whether it's raw materials for my manufacturing environment or whether it's product directly available to sell to consumers, to my customers. It's all about having available inventory. And there are two risk factors there, right? There's a supply risk, which has a couple of components to it. My suppliers could be delivering late, which is happening all the time today, right? We can't pick up a news report, go online, watch TV news or anything and not see daily reports of the challenges in supply chain. Pictures of the freighter sitting out on Long Beach Harbor, numbering 70 or 80 different ships sitting out there for weeks or more at a time, waiting to get unloaded. So late deliveries is now just standard part of life. And so that's one challenge or risk. The other is that we get less than we requested, right? We order 100 units of some item and we get 80 or 90. And if that happens consistently, we're certainly going to have a risk to our availability. And so we need to be aware of those risks. And then on the demand side, where we have actual demand that exceeds what we expected, right? We forecasted a certain amount of demand for our certain product, and we've exceeded that, which now causes a risk to our availability. And so both of these things are really occurring today, right? One of the reasons we have the supply challenge and transportation challenges we have is because of the unprecedented increase in demand that has occurred over the last 18 months or so. And so these two things have combined to create a real challenge for us in our inventory environment. And then the other aspect of inventory risk is just understanding what the level of proper inventory investment needs to be, right? You might tell me, hey, I've got $5 million worth of inventory on the books. And then the question becomes, well, is that the right amount? And how do I know, right? Should it be less than that? Should it be 4 million? Should it be more than that? Should it be 6 million or 8 million? And so we have to be able to answer that question as to what's the right level of investment. And we've got two different kind of competing interests that come into that discussion. One is from a marketing and a sales strategy and how we go to market, right? What is the messaging there? We see lots of businesses that advertise themselves, position themselves as having the widest selection, available, right? Thousands of items on hand, in stock, ready to serve you, ship within 3 hours or 24 hours or whatever, all those different kinds of messages. And that's part of the environment that we are in, right? That's how we go to market. And so we have to have our inventory investment reflect that. Inventory policy doesn't exist on an island. It's not a silo. It's part of the overall corporate strategy. So what does that look like? But then from a financial perspective, we typically have constraints, right? We don't have unlimited budget, unlimited warehouse space, et cetera, to maybe hold all the inventory that our sales and marketing folks would like us to. So we have to apply these constraints, and together those two things kind of balance each other and result in this decision of what the level of inventory is. But then we bring into the mix that concept of risk, right? So what is the risk of our availability? How are our suppliers performing? How well do we understand our demand environment? And so that impacts how much inventory investment we make, because we have to have a safety stock or a buffer stock to manage those different demand and supply risks that feed that, plus all the other multipliers that come into play, right? Again, the challenges that we're seeing today with lead time performance in our suppliers, et cetera. And so we've got an awful lot of challenges there that all impact that ultimate decision as to what our inventory investment should be. So with that as kind of a sort of a fundamental layer, let's talk a little bit more deeply now about the inventory management maturity curve itself. And I know this is a bit of a busy slide, but we'll walk you through some of these components and hopefully that'll help. But the first thing to notice is we've got two different axes here. Going up on the left is we have the level of maturity and the level of benefits that we would accrue in our organization as we move along the curve. And along the bottom is effort, both in terms of cost and time, right? It takes, these things don't happen in a vacuum. They take effort, they take planning, they take policy and prioritization and so forth. They take, labor hours, et cetera. They take financial investment. So there's certainly a curve here, but as we move up that curve and we increase the level of effort, we also increase our level of maturity and our functionality there, our capability, and then of course the benefits that accrue from that. So it all starts on the lower left really with data accuracy and data purification. In the case of NETSTOCK and any of the, if you're dumping data to reports or to Excel, whatever the tool is, you're relying on accurate data coming from your acumatica system, right? And so in terms of inventory, that means I've got to have confidence and can rely on the numbers that say, here's what quantity of items I have in what locations, whether those are actual physical locations or virtual locations, perhaps within a warehouse, maybe a QC component, a manufacturing component, however you imagine your locations and your warehouse structure and so forth. You've got to be able to rely on accurate information at that level. And so, again, the warehouse management functionality that's native to acumatica, or whether you're using some of the great third-party add-ons that help you with barcoding technologies and so forth to get accurate and timely information, that's really the very first key step, right? And as we move through these next couple of steps, all kind of shaded green here in colors of green, we really view these as fundamental to where almost every small, medium-sized business needs to get to today. And so that's really just the table stakes, is accurate data. Then we make a decision about what to stock or not stock, right? There's a lot of things that we could have in our catalog available to our customers that we don't necessarily have to keep in inventory. And so we have to think that through. The term that you may hear in that regard is called rationalization, right? I can rationalize which items need to be on hand and which ones don't. Maybe I've got vendors that are very competent and capable and I've got great relationships with that can stock inventory for me and get it to me quickly, or even drop ship directly to my customers if that's an option, right? So I've got some decisions to make as to what I stock and don't stock. And then once I've decided what I'm actually going to carry, what it makes sense for me to actually have in inventory, now we need to do some item classification. And so now we're like on the third or fourth layer up the curve here, where we can start to identify the nature of the items that we have decided to put into inventory. Excuse me. So of course we're very familiar with the concept of ABC analysis, ranking our items by value. whether that's at a cost basis or maybe margin or contribution to the business, things like that. But there's a dollar value there that we can help rank our items in a level of importance in that ABC model. But there's also another level of classification that we could do and should do, and NETSTOCK supports, is this concept of tracking speed of movement or velocity. And so in the NETSTOCK application, we'll rank those same items that we've ranked in terms of value. We'll also rank in terms of speed of movement, high, medium, or low. And so once we've got that understanding and we can view and query our items from those couple of different criteria, we now have a much better feel for the nature of the items in our inventory. We can now start to develop policies around that, which ones are most important. We might have higher target fill rates, for example, and just other different metrics and targets that we can have in place now that we understand the nature of those items, okay? And once we've done that, we now can start to get a little bit more sophisticated. We can start applying some forecasting algorithms and bring in some more of a demand view of those items. And we can start looking at setting safety stock levels or buffer stocks to, again, mitigate the risks that we've talked about, right? So if I've got a supplier that's not reliable or is really struggling in current environment with the delivery and transportation challenges and so forth, then obviously I have to have more of a buffer, more safety stock on hand to manage that risk. So if I've got a late delivery, it doesn't cripple me, it doesn't have me run out of that inventory. At the same time, if I've got demand that's very difficult to predict, that's very volatile, then we certainly have to have some additional safety stock to mitigate that risk. So that safety stock setting really needs to be policy set, right? And it's important to think about that safety stock or buffer stock is not excess stock, right? This is intentional. It's by design that we have X amount of buffer to mitigate risk. That would not be defined as excess stock in our terminology, right? In our viewpoint, it's policy driven. It's there for a reason, and so it's really critical to have that set, because if we don't, if we're guessing as to what the right safety stock or buffer stock needs to be, we tend to err on the side of over purchasing, right? That's how we end up with excess. It's because we don't know what the proper safety stock needs to be, so then we order too much because we've got risk that we're concerned about, and so we'll play it safe, quote unquote, right? But obviously there's impact, there's negative impact to having too much inventory. It costs us carrying costs, which is hard dollars going out the door, and it ties up working capital that could be used elsewhere in the business. So there's a lot of negativity, negative results and impacts from having excess inventory, and we can really manage that better by doing a proper job of safety stock. Then we start to get into a little bit more of some sophisticated capabilities, right? Demand planning and managing those forecasts, doing more collaboration, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of this on the next slide as we talk about the forecasting maturity. We have the ability to do some modeling and strategic planning. Again, we can become more strategic once we've got the fundamentals in place, and now we've become more sophisticated. And then we can really take a hard look at managing that excess, right? Now that we've understood which of our items are in an excess mode, well, now we can take action against that. And it's really something that has to happen as a regular part of our routine. It's kind of like brushing your teeth every day, right? If you don't do it, it can get away from you in a hurry. And so you really have to have tools and visibility to that excess inventory to stay on top of it, because it can go south in a hurry. And so if you're on top of that, you put processes in place, you've made people accountable in terms of, right, the people and the process component here. You've made people accountable for managing this aspect of the business, and you can really stay on top of it and make a big difference in your profitability as a result. But then there's also the supply side, right, which has now become so critical in really understanding how our suppliers are doing and increasing that level of communication and the quality of that communication, being able to share with them information about your requirements and what you're seeing in your marketplaces, so that they have a good heads up as to what your needs are going to be, so that they can plan accordingly. Understanding what the transportation constraints are and what those transportation costs have ballooned into, so that maybe now if I can work with my supplier to buy more at one time and maybe minimize some of the per unit transportation costs as a result, how can you help me fill a container with just my stuff in it and so forth. So there's one of the benefits of having a proper tool in place for our supply planners and buyers is that they now have time, instead of messing with spreadsheets and custom reports and becoming data jockeys. They now have time to do these higher level, really valuable activities within the organization. So managing excess, managing our suppliers, and so forth really pays off. And then that's where we have to understand, again, do we have the right people? Do they have the right training? Did we give them the right tools to be able to be most effective at their job? And one of the things that gripes me a little bit, and you may have heard me speak about this in other sessions, is, even here at acuCONNECT, right, we're seeing all these tremendous tools that are really helpful. We've got CRM systems, and we've got integrations to LinkedIn and Zoom Info, and all these applications that really help our sales and marketing folks, right? If you maybe using Salesforce and HubSpot, and all these other great applications that really help us do a great job on the sales and marketing side, and we give our folk great tools there. On the financial side, we've got all these great budgeting tools and financial analysis tools. Of course, starts with a great chart of accounts and flexibility in our account structures and so forth. So now we've got our financial teams armed to the teeth with all kinds of great applications to help them understand what's going on. And then when it comes to one of our most important assets, financially, perhaps the most critical asset, our inventory, we give our planners and supply chain folks, hey, here's some reports, and here's a Excel spreadsheet that you can use or build for yourself, right? It doesn't seem fair. And as we've seen with the disruption in supply chains going on over the last 12, 18 months, we're seeing a lot more appreciation for the critical nature of this supply chain role in our organizations. It's kind of always been the case in larger enterprises, but I think the middle market players now, our typical customers in the Acumatica space and in the NETSTOCK space, I think there's much more appreciation for how challenging this is and how much worse it's gotten, how we do need to provide them with the right tools. We need to give them the resources they need to be able to do the job better, and have this continuous improvement process, right? And this is a nice linear curve that we're looking at here. It gives you a feel for a very logical step-by-step progression. But of course, in real life, we may skip a step, jump one, come back and fix another one, right? See some gaps. It can be a little bit messier than what's represented in a nice clean graphic. But we always have to have this constant or continuous improvement cycle going on. Again, where are you on this curve? What are you doing today? Where are the gaps? What's the next step? How do I get there? What are the tools and the people that I need to help me get there? Do I need to change some processes as a result of better tools now that I have in place, right? All these things are interdependent, and they're not necessarily in a clean progression, right? We have to come back and see, okay, what was the impact of that on some of our processes and our people? Improve those things. Now, what was the next step? So understand where you are in this process. Be honest with your assessment, right? Be maybe brutally honest. Where do I have gaps, and what do I need to do so that I can make my way across this journey and continue to improve and get better and more sophisticated, and then see the impact of each of those and celebrate the victories, which we'll talk about a little bit here in the next screen when I get to the change management component. So let's take a quick segue out of that overall inventory maturity curve and dive a little bit deeper into the concept of forecasting and the role that forecasting has in that curve. And it's almost a curve within a curve, right? We can think about forecasting as sort of a separate critical piece of that. And we may find ourselves needing to improve or move across a journey of improvement here. At the very beginning levels, the concept of forecasting is really manual, tends to be really disconnected. And there's a lack of accountability for accuracy. So then there tends to be lack of accuracy because of a lack of accountability. The fact that we're disconnected and kind of doing this on an island. I might be in my own spreadsheet doing some things, or whatever the tool was, writing some custom reports and trying to manipulate some data, but very unsophisticated, right? Very rudimentary, and not a good place to be. We really need to, if we find ourselves there, we really need to move to the next stage, which we would call the evolving stage. and start to put some structure in place. Start to assign some responsibility and accountability. So have some expectations as to where we need this to go and who's responsible for it and how we're going to get there, and maybe now putting some better tools in there, maybe a more sophisticated Excel spreadsheet, maybe some help from the IT folks to figure out how to better extract data and get it into that Excel spreadsheet. So that's at the very least, I think, where most small, medium-sized firms need to be. But hopefully you see the value and the reasoning behind going to that next level of improving on that process and getting to a more formal measurement environment, right? And building, as a result, having the ability to build more consensus. So when I bring the different constituents into the room to talk about what's our supply chain strategy and what's our demand look like, that I've got sales and marketing folks in the room, I've got operations people in the room, I've got finance people in the room, and I've got my seat at the table as a supply chain planner or buyer to say, okay, this is, again, we don't operate in silos. We all depend on each other. Operations needs to know what the expectations are. Finance needs to know and communicate what we're capable of doing, what the financial cash flows look like. So now we've got more consensus. We've got better tools to help drive that consensus. We've got better measurement and algorithms in place, and we can start doing better exception management. Instead of looking at the whole, we've got things pretty well organized. So now I can really focus on where things are going wrong, right? Where's the 20% that's killing me today, and how do I take action on those? So really encourage you in your organization, if you've assessed where you are, to at least get to that level so that you can have really good internal conversations and communications and collaboration around what's our goal here and what do we need to achieve and how are we going to get there. And then ultimately you get to a best practices place, right? Where there's really full collaboration and integration. Everybody's on board. Everybody sees the information at their fingertips. We've applied best fit technologies and methodologies to get the right algorithms looking at the right items by location. And then we've really embarked on this continuous improvement process within forecasting, and as a result, within the overall inventory maturity curve that this is a part of, right? So hopefully that gives you a view for what that journey looks like, and what those steps are along the way. And then hopefully motivate you to think about the people and the processes and the technology that are available to you today, and where the gaps are and where you need to go. So I'll wrap up with a couple of thoughts on change, which is always difficult, right? And we're in such a volatile, disrupted environment today in our supply chains that, and I'm hearing reports. There's been studies done. There's articles in industry journals now talking about the level of burnout and frustration and the number of resignations that are occurring within supply chain, that profession within our organizations. People are really stressed. They're really burnt out. They're working hard. They're challenged by what's going on in the marketplace, and we've got a real difficult period ahead of us. The great thing is that universities are now pumping out some really bright folks coming out of supply chain programs, which didn't even exist years ago. Even 10, 15 years ago, you were hard pressed to find very many supply chain degree programs and so forth in universities. So there's some really good young talent coming out of the schools now that maybe will fill that gap. And I think there's great opportunities for folks that want to pursue that as a career. But think about then, change being hard, understand where you are and where should you be, and where are your competitors. One of the things that I know, is in that when the world changes like it has so dramatically, we know that there's going to be winners and losers. And we've already seen empirical evidence of that. Firms that went into the COVID environment and the lockdowns and all the disruption that were not prepared in any respect, did not have any visibility, were not at all nimble in their reaction to that, really had a problem. And some have not survived. Some are really badly diminished right now. So think about where you are and where your competitors are, because this is a very competitive space. If you compete against the big guys, the Walmarts and Home Depots or Amazons, the online environments, they've got resources, they've got time and talent and money. And you may have some local regional competitors as well. So you really need to understand where you are, where your competitors are, and what do I need to do, and then take that first step, right? That's the old cliche, right? Every journey starts with one step. So take that first step, establish the need and the benefit for why you're making the changes, lay out that roadmap, and just step at a time, right? And let the new tools and process take some time to settle in. Again, celebrate the successes. Always keep that North Star out there as to why we're doing this. What's the benefit going to be? Make sure that we're achieving those benefits. If not, go back and refine. Again, continuous improvement is really what it's about. And think about, again, in this changed world, disrupted world that we're in, will you be one of those winners, right? What if your firm could do the things you want to do, right? What if you could make the investments in technology and in your people? What if you could crush your competition? What if you could do the right things to start this journey and end up, as you look back a year or two from now, back to where we are today, and see that the progress that you've made, and again, celebrate that and enjoy the fact that you've been able to make those steps. So it's not too late. If you find yourself stressed and in a tough spot right now in your supply chain management environment, it's not too late. But the time is fleeting. All right, this is going to get tougher, and I really encourage you to take an honest assessment. See if you can't be one of those winners that come out of this new normal that we're going to be emerging into. So I guess I'll leave it at that. I know not a very technical conversation, right? More of a thought leadership approach, but we really want you to be thinking about these things. NETSTOCK wakes up every single day, all around the world, asking themselves, how can we help our customers do better? We believe every small, medium-sized business deserves to have the tools necessary to succeed and compete in a very challenging market. It's what drives us every day. And we would love to have a conversation with you, your customers, if you're a partner, or you as an end user, to how we can help you get from A to B to C, et cetera. So with that, I'll open it up, see if there's any questions. Otherwise, please come by our booth. Reach out to me directly. There's my email address. Notice that it's .co, not .com in our URL. Happy to chat with any of you at any time. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. And yes, it is expo time. So,
all right.
I know there is one question. What do you predict for changes to just-in-time supply chain management once we get through the COVID mess?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, just in time was kind of a nirvana and a catchphrase that was out there. I don't think it was ever really attainable, but it was maybe a goal, something to reach for. And I think what this has taught us is that we went too far. The pendulum had swung too far to that direction, and we really forgot about that intelligent safety stock calculation. I think what we're seeing is a lot of companies are definitely dealing with changes to their supply chain. They're trying to shorten the supply chain, simplify it, do some more nearshoring and onshoring of some of the components, if not all, of the products that they sell. So I think that just in time is never going to be achieved. I think we swung too far. We got too lean. You've heard lean management and so forth. And I think that's where the adjustment's going to come. People need to be smarter about that.
Great. And I think that was the only question. So thank you everyone for joining our session, and please head over to the expo.
Thanks.